Matt Weston.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I rise to endorse the amendments made by the government, but also to endorse and echo the amendments made by my honourable friend, the member for Great Grimsby. I very much welcome the bill. Sitting on the Housing, Communities, Local Government Select Committee, we heard very wise evidence and counsel from various groups, including landlords, organisations, as well as local authorities. And it's quite clear, really, that for many years there's been a bit of a wild west in certain parts of the country where we have had some very good and responsible agents. I'm very proud to say I've got some excellent agents in my own constituency. But there are, of course, the exceptional ones for whom greater regulation is really needed, who are very much less scrupulous than the others. And this is very timely. Having lived in France myself and been a renter there, it was clearly very evident just how much tighter the legislation was and how much more balanced it was. So to echo the points of my honourable friend, the member for Great Grimsby, this is really about rebalancing the relationship between landlord, agent and tenant to make it much more transparent and much fairer, because tenants really do and have felt for many years disempowered in that relationship. And of course what we've seen over the last 20 years has been a significant growth in the proportion of people private renting. We've seen that rise double. In parts of the country it's actually increased by 200%, such as in the northeast. So it is really important that we get to grips with this, and I think the bill has certainly moved a long way in doing that. But as a constituent mentioned to me in this last week, who is facing for 1 year, who is a student, who is facing tenant fees of £595 for 1 year, it is extortion in some cases that we are witnessing. And it is particularly relevant where in those sectors you see high churn of tenancy, i.e. typically a 1 year tenancy that the tenant is taking. So I do believe we could have gone further, but I do certainly welcome the main part of the bill. From the comments that have been made in the Chamber, but also by organisations such as Shelter and Citizens Advice and Which, the default fees, I think, could have been more clearly and more greatly defined. As the member for Harrow East was saying, that the issue about what is reasonable is very much open to interpretation, and we have seen extreme cases in, say, replacement key costs and so on. So I do support Amendment 3 that has been put forward by the Labour front bench in that circumstance. I just want to move on to the level of deposit cap, and it did come up. We heard widely from landlords and others on the Select Committee, and I would have preferred personally to have seen a deposit of 4 weeks being the maximum, but I do understand how we've got to where we are. But it is really a particular issue, as I say, on the high churn residents or tenancies. So the idea of passporting, as put forward by the Minister, is, I think, a welcome move. I will indeed.
He's making a really good point. Would he agree with me? The observation I make, and people like Shelter as well, is that high deposits have an impact on increasing homelessness. We've seen a tripling in homelessness in my area, the South Lakes, just in the last year, despite building more council houses. And an average, at a 6-week limit, means an average deposit of £1,100. For many people, that makes a rental unaffordable.
My honourable friend makes a very valid and pertinent point. It is very much part of the cause of homelessness in many areas, and because people feel excluded, financially, socially excluded from the private rented sector. And given the growth, as I was alluding to at the beginning of what I was saying, it is made much more difficult because we've seen a 20% reduction in social rented properties in the same period, which is a critical part. I do want to move on because of time. The issue of compliance, again, as has been mentioned earlier, we did hear through the Select Committee just how few authorities, whether through whether it be a case of less appetite, or whether because they just do not have the enforcement officers, there is very little uptake or appetite to do this, to follow through on enforcement. So, as has been mentioned already, 93% of authorities have not actually heard. The Select Committee has accounted for half of those cases. So I would just urge really the Minister to reconsider being put forward by the Labour front bench. That's Amendments 1 and 2. If £30,000 is seen as too high, as was mentioned by the member for Great Grimsby, that if that is a maximum, then there should be the flexibility for authorities to introduce a figure which is more appropriate, because £5,000, as was mentioned by the member of Harrow East, is a cost of doing business, and that is the way this has all been done in the past, and we have to really break this for the future because of the growth and importance of the private rental sector. So I would say I do support and welcome the bill, and I would just ask that there were perhaps some tighter regulation on default fees.